Mangwanani Malelepo Fukenjani Kleklas Vanave Africa. Welcome to Africa Good Morning, the news and current affairs show bringing you everything you need to know happening on the African continent and beyond. You are joined by Ashwin Mberi. Let's get into some of our top stories, at least some of the top stories you can expect in this morning's broadcast. Nigerian strike shuts power grid and disrupts airlines. In Egypt, Mustafa Madbouly reappointed as Prime Minister, and South Korea's Yoon hosts Africa Summit to tap minerals as well as a vast export market. We'll also be talking to Mike Sichula as he brings us the latest news stories from Zambia and our Caribbean cricket. Joel is back straight from the T20 Cricket World Cup, as well as Ari Hochad with the rest of the sport news. Top stories after the break.
Neo Paints has established a 67-year Namibian legacy, creating personalized paint solutions that blend quality and innovation for the Namibian people. We pride ourselves in being a 100% Namibian-owned company, investing in our country and our people by employing and empowering true Namibians. With every brushstroke, Neo Paints commits to our quality guarantee and always delivering a coat of excellence. At Neo Paints, we always stay true to our country. We are as Namibian as you.
All right, we start our top stories in Nigeria, where Nigeria's main labor unions yesterday shut down the national grid and disrupted flights across the country as they began an indefinite strike over the government's failure to agree a new minimum wage. The strike began after talks broke down between the government and the country's two biggest union federations, the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, over increasing the minimum wage. It is the fourth since President Bola Tinubu took office last year. Nigerian airline Ibom Air said it was suspending flights until further notice due to the strike, while another, United Nigeria, said airports across the country had been shut down and striking workers had permitted none of its flights to operate. Oil unions also threatened to halt oil production, but Nigeria's oil regulator chief Bigebenga Komolafe said contingencies were in place to ensure output was not disrupted. Since taking office, Tinubu has embarked on Nigeria's boldest reforms, which has fueled a rise in inflation to an almost 30-year high and worsened the cost of living crisis in Africa's most populous nation. Now, for the second year in a row, Burkina Faso is the world's most neglected displacement crisis. This is according to the NRC, which is the Norwegian Refugee Council. They issued a report yesterday. With a record high 707,000 new displacements within the country's borders, the humanitarian crisis in Burkina Faso continued unabated in 2023, while hundreds of thousands of people were cut from aid. The number of people killed in violence doubled last year, with over 8,400 deaths. Meanwhile, the number of Burkinabe refugees seeking safety in the neighboring countries almost tripled, reaching a total of 148,317, according to UNHCR figures. An unprecedented 42,000 people suffered catastrophic levels of food insecurity, and up to 2 million civilians were trapped in 36 blockaded towns across the country by year's end. Now, with over 6,100 schools closed by spring 2023, Burkina Faso was home to nearly half of all closed schools in Central and West Africa. There's quite a lot happening across Africa, without a doubt. It is very sad that there is a report of the most neglected spaces. We certainly hope that they can get the help and aid that they direly need. Let's continue with our stories in Egypt. Egypt's President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi yesterday reappointed Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouly to form a new government. Now, Madbouly earlier yesterday submitted his government's resignation 2 months after el-Sisi was sworn in for a third 6-year term. It is customary for the government to resign at the start of a fresh presidential mandate. Madbouly, 58, was appointed Prime Minister in June 2018, replacing Sharif Ismail. He had previously served as Housing Minister since March 2014. The architect and urban designer in the past had led the United Nations Habitat Regional Office for Arab States. Now, el-Sisi won 89.6% of the vote in the December election. Moving on to our next story. NGO worker with Portuguese as well as Belgian ties is accused of inciting a revolt in the Central African Republic. Prosecutors in the Central African Republic say they have detained a European employee of a US-based non-governmental organization on suspicion of being a threat to state security and seeking to incite revolt against security forces. In a statement read on television, the public prosecutor in the capital, Bangui, said Martin Joseph Figueira had Portuguese and Belgian passports and had been detained on 25 May after an investigation was opened. It did not give details of the charges but accused Figueira of being in contact with armed groups. FHI 360, the public health NGO for which Figueira worked, according to the prosecutor, did not immediately reply to a request for comment. The Portuguese Foreign Ministry also did not respond. Central African Republic, a former French colony and one of the world's poorest countries, has become a close Russian ally in recent years, hosting one of the Wagner Group mercenary army's largest foreign operations. Violence waned there after a peace accord in February 2019 between the government and 14 armed groups, but the situation remains volatile as swaths of territory are still outside government control. All right, let's get into the last of our top stories. It seems to be a bit of a domino effect, naturally. After South Africa went to elections last week, Wednesday, it came out that the ruling party, ANC, did not have a majority. They lost their majority quite drastically, down to 40%, which naturally meant that a coalition became necessary. Let's see how they are navigating that. Rather, now South Africa was on tenterhooks yesterday for the African National Congress to signal whom it would choose as a partner to govern the nation after it lost its majority in last week's election for the first time in 30 years of democracy. The ANC had comfortably won every previous election since the end of apartheid in 1994. But this time, voters, wary of joblessness, inequality and rolling power blackouts, gave it just 40.2% of the vote, down from 57.5% 5 years ago. The ANC's potential partners are diametrically opposed, ranging from the Free Marketeer Democratic Alliance to Umkhonto weSizwe and the Economic Freedom Fighters, parties that advocate nationalizing mines and banks and redistributing land. With the future direction of government policy at stake, a working committee of 27 ANC officials was scheduled to meet later today, Tuesday, to prepare a presentation on the party's options to be delivered to the National Executive Committee tomorrow on the 5th of June. We'll certainly be keeping an eye on that. Those have been our top stories on Africa Good Morning. After the break, we're going to be joined by Mike Sichula from Zambia.
E-Ticket, your online ticket solution for events and event marketing, bringing you ease of mind and making sure that your event gets out there. For more information, contact events@nmh.com.na.
All right, it's time for us to talk to Mike Sichula in Zambia as we get the latest stories from there. Mike, Uribanji. Unfortunately, Mike, it seems like we are having audio issues yet again. We'll see how we can resolve that. However, I do have Mike's stories. Stick around for the stories from Zambia. Now, we highlighted this yesterday in our top stories, but we were talking about the broader CASA agreement. Let's get into the details from President Hakainde Hichilema, who proposed the introduction of the non-stop border posts with the help of technology in the Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area, CASA. The president said this when delivering his keynote address at the first ever CASA Head of State Summit being held in Livingstone. He has also called for an end to poaching in the Kavango-Zambezi Transfrontier Conservation Area area. He also assured the Kazaa Secretariat of support from the 5 heads of state in the Kazaa region towards the realization of the Kazaa vision. Kazaa Executive Director Dr. Nyambe has described the Head of State Summit as a milestone in the history of Kazaa. And you can see there, Namibian President Nagolo Mumba is also in that image. And Kazaa is very important, particularly when it comes to tourists, the ability to move seamlessly in this region. For those who might need an example, you might think of the Schengen visa in Europe. All right, another story we touched on yesterday, and we did say Mike would give us more detail on it, was former President Edgar Lungu's wife being arrested. Now there's details from the former president himself. The Drug Enforcement Commission has charged and formally arrested former First Lady Esther Lungu for possession of property reasonably suspected to be proceeds of crime. Now, the former First Lady has been jointly charged with the former President Edgar Lungu's daughter. Now, DEC Public Relations Officer Alan Tamba says Mrs. Lungu is accused of possessing real estate properties that include 15 white double-story flats in State Lodge area of Chongwe District, reasonably suspected to be proceeds of crime, whose calculated estimated cost of construction was over 41 million kwacha. Meanwhile, Ms. Chieso and Mr. Piri is accused of possessing real estate properties that include a 3-story lodge called the Crest Lodge. The estimated cost of construction as at November 2022 was over 15 million kwacha and was interpolated to over 9 million kwacha. And a little backdrop to this is obviously the former President Edgar Lungu is fiercely opposing this. And just 2 weeks ago, or last week rather, he was already facing issues with regards to apparently inciting some kind of insurrection to the political process in Zambia. So it's very shaky waters there. We certainly hope and expect Mike to be back on Friday to add more to that story. Now, the last of the story, we're going to talk about sport in Zambia. FIFA Director Member Associations Africa, Gelson Fernandez, says he is in the country on a fact-finding mission on the wrangles that had engulfed Zambian football. Fernandez says once done, the findings will be submitted to the relevant FIFA organ that will then give its final judgment over the matter. He said it is important for FIFA to show presence as Zambia has too much potential and should not be jeopardized. I think this is a story that we've seen across Africa. Namibia has certainly had some FIFA representatives come through. Zimbabwe has had the same, and now with Zambia, and we certainly hope that any stabilization efforts can come into fruition. What we also hope could come into fruition is some warmer weather. I'm not sure if it will work that way. We do, however, have the weather predictions.
Introducing 061 Express, brought to you by Synergy in proud partnership with Vintic Express. Here's your chance to make your voice heard to celebrate the businesses that make Vintic exceptional. From your favorite coffee spot to the salon that always gets your style just right. It's time to shine a spotlight on the gems of our city. Over the next 8 weeks, it's your chance to vote for your favorites to recognize the best of the best. Nominations open on the 25th of April and close on the 5th of May. To nominate your favorite business, simply save this number, 085 785 6231, and WhatsApp hashtag 061 Express or scan the QR code below and follow the on-screen instructions. By nominating your favorites, you're not only supporting local businesses, but you also stand a chance to win your share of 50,000 Namibian dollars in cash. The voting process will be the same as the nominations process, using the Synergy chatbot and the hashtag 061Express. Voting opens on June 5th and closes on June 23rd. Make sure to cast your vote for the best of the best. The winners will be announced on June 28th. 061Express, celebrating the heartbeat of Windhoek. Get ready.
All right, let's get into economic news. Africa's rich mineral resources and its potential as a vast export market are at the top of South Korea's agenda as it hosts a summit with the leaders of 48 nations this week, with plans for aid on industrial infrastructure and digital transformation. Africa is a crucial partner for South Korea to further its industrial advances, and cooperation with Africa is not a choice but a necessity. President Yoon Suk Yeol's Deputy National Security Advisor Kim Tai-ho said. Now, global airlines yesterday raised their profit forecast for 2024 and projected industry-wide revenues just shy of $1 trillion. However, IATA Director General Willie Walsh spoke on the current state of the actual margins. Reuters reports.
Particularly in Asia, I think international travel is still recovering there. The demand environment remains robust. So I'm pleased that we've been able to update the outlook for the industry for 2024 and increase the forecast profitability to $30 billion US. The important point, however, is that the margin remains wafer thin. We're still looking at a margin of just over 3%. So when people look at our industry, they're often focusing on the top line revenues of close to $1 trillion US. But that margin performance is still well below where the industry needs to be.
Very interesting take there. All right, let's head over to the economic indicators before we return with Caribbean cricket, Joel, and other sport news. Now, as you know, Namibia's Richelieu Eagles won their first match against Oman at the T20 Cricket World Cup yesterday, and we brought you that story as it broke. Here are the comments from Coach Pierre De Bruyne with some insights that he had after the match in our Caribbean Cricket Joel segment.
Yeah, we're ecstatic about the result. Close game, but I suppose taking it that deep and then winning the game in a super over was a great learning for the side. I really thought that the way we bowled and fielded, we executed our plans perfectly. We did a lot of homework on their batters, and we restricted them to 109, which was an excellent effort. With the bat, it was a tough wicket to say the least, especially from the one end. However, we made it difficult for ourselves. We just lost that intensity in the middle. on those type of wickets, you still need to identify the bad balls. You've got to be in that mindset that a bad ball remains a bad ball. And in between, you need to, really work hard, run hard between the wickets and keep that intensity. Even if you're in low gear or low risk gear, you still have to keep that intensity. So we've learned some good lessons there.
Here is Ari Hochart with the international sport.
Good day everyone, time for international sports news, and starting off with tennis news first. This is week 2 of the Roland Garros. It's the French Open. It's close to the quarterfinals, semi-finals and finals coming weekend. And news from the men's division, it is Yannick Sinner, the number 2 seed. He safely threw at a tough game against a French opponent, Corentin Moutet, and he won in 4 sets. That is Yannick Sinner through to the quarterfinals. Also number 3 seed, that is Carlos Alcaraz, and he beat Felix Auger-Aliassime of Canada quite comfortably, 6-3, 6-3 and 6-1, also through to the quarterfinals. He will have a tough game in the quarterfinals, so he needs to play against the 9th seed, that is Stefanos Tsitsipas of Greece. Very good form he showed on clay this season so far. He beat Matteo Arnoldi of Italy in 4 sets, and that game will be played on Tuesday. That is Alcaraz against Tsitsipas. On the women's side of the draw, Southern African or African concern, it is Ons Jabeur of Tunisia. She's the only African in the tournament on the women's side of the draw, and she's through to the quarterfinals as well. Beat Clara Towson 6-4, 6-1, and then a great result for Coco Gauff. Coco Gauff of America showing good form, one of the early favourites, and she beat Elisabeth Cosentini of Italy quite comfortably 6-1 and 6-2. And it is Iga Swiatek that's also through to the quarterfinals, and also good result for Marketa Vandrossova. She beat Olga Daniklov. She beat her by 6-4 and 6-2. And so it will be Iga Swiatek playing against Vandrossova in the quarterfinals. And Vandrossova is the current Wimbledon champion. Going on to golf news, it was the US Open for women that was concluded over the weekend. A good result, great result for Yuko Sasa, and she's from Japan. Great achievement. She's only 22 years old, but won her 2nd US Open already. Youngest ever to win 2 US Open by the age of 22. She ended up with a total of -4 for the 4 rounds, and she beat compatriot of Japan into 2nd place. It's Haya Shibalu of Japan. She was -1 in 2nd position. Canadian Open for men on the PGA. Great story for Robert McIntyre of Scotland. He won the Canadian Open by 1 shot. He was 16 under par. But the great story of this tournament was that his father was his caddy. His father don't normally caddy for him. He came over just for this one tournament, and they actually won the tournament. So great to have father and son celebrate together the victory of Robert McIntyre. His dad's name is Dougie. And to conclude today's international sports news, it is cricket news from the T20 World Cup cricket for men in the West Indies and in the United States. It's Namibia off to a good start, beating Oman in the first game. They play against Scotland on Thursday. But other interesting news from the tournament is that organisers confirmed that security has been tightened for the games being played in New York. Games being played there from the 3rd of June to the 12th of June. And it seems a bit extreme as well, because the security company confirmed that there will be snipers all around the ground for all the games being played there. It seems a bit harsh, but they say that is for the safety and security of all the spectators and the players. One high-profile game that's going to be played on the 9th of June will include Pakistan that play against India. So that is a bit of a security risk, apparently, according to the United States. So snipers around the cricket ground, that's all new in a World Cup, but that's reality, I suppose, of world sport at the moment. That's international sport for today. Hope you have a great sport day, and we talk international sport again tomorrow. Goodbye.
DSTV2 at 5, GoTV 25, 1up2.com, Network Media Hub on YouTube is precisely where you can find us. Thank you for staying with Africa. Good morning from me, Ashen Berry, and the AGM team. Suraj Kanaka.